Hello and welcome to September 19th Gateway API meeting. This meeting is governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which pretty much sums up to be excellent to one another. So please be excellent to one another. We're going to get started off today by going over some agenda items that Rob put in. I'll share my screen here. All right. Okay.
Yeah, this is a bit of a joint effort here. Nick added the first thing about the milestone, and I just kind of expanded on that. I wanted to just run through the 060 milestone. We're getting awfully close, and make sure we were all on board with the major themes here. One, Nick, I think the most relevant thing that we're really trying to get in is your gap 1364. Yep. The big conditions overhaul. I'm excited to get that one going. Then reference grant to beta. I know we have a lot of implementations of this. I'm curious, anyone who's implemented this, have you gotten feedback on it? Can you tell if anyone's using this yet?
We have implemented this. We have no users of it.
Okay.
We have implemented it. I do not think we've heard any direct feedback about it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I know Contour's implemented as well, but yeah, we hadn't heard anyone. Problem is, like, people only tell you about it if it's not working, right? Like,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that seems to be the overall theme here. For those on the call, if we were to continue with the plan of graduating this to beta, are there any, would anyone push back on that?
I'm +1.
Okay. Yeah, it seems non-controversial enough that we should just run with it. We've had this in the API for a while. It's broadly implemented. So I think we need an issue to track this if we don't already have it. But yeah, we should just get this one in.
So we'll need to do API review for that one, right?
Yeah. And then next up on here was gRPC route alpha. I don't know if Richard is on this call. Oh, you are.
So
I think we still need some docs and as a stretch goal, also conformance tests.
yeah, so I'm working on that with priority. I think the docs I should be able to have in by the end of the week, and I'm aiming for the end of September for the conformance tests.
Awesome, thanks. The response header modifier, that's a PR that we'll get to in triage later today. It just needs review. I feel bad. I think it's been ready to go for probably a week plus, and I just haven't had the bandwidth to approve it. But if anyone else has time to take a look, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'll try and get to it tomorrow. But I think this one is just about good to go as well. And bonus points, Sanskar, I think that's their name, added test to begin with. Conformance test, which is great, but we still need docs on this one. And you know, adding conformance tests before there's an implementation is always a little scary, but hopefully this practice works. These are opt-in tests, and at least it provides a framework for what we think is right. But maybe in the future we need an experimental channel for conformance tests as well, instead of just opt-in. Yeah,
I feel like opt-in is kind of equivalent to some extent.
Yeah, that's my take. Yeah. The next one, Gamma, I don't know if anyone's here can talk about what we might want to get into the release for Gamma.
I'm here. I think so. We've spent the past couple of weeks focusing on kind of like shifting targets, and we've been working on defining how HTTP route should be used for east-west traffic management. It's kind of like what we determined after a few false starts on different potential implementations. We're working on a proposal to kind of move the existing work in progress doc towards a GEP that will, I think, try to share during the Gamma meeting tomorrow. And I think the intent would be to like get that GEP approved for 060. I don't think it's going to require any code changes. It's really going to focus on just documentation around like use cases and expected behavior and like maybe what status should be set when.
Cool, that's great. I know it's got to be difficult to get through and build consensus on that, but excited to see where we land. And yeah, like you said, hopefully we can get some kind of like a standard recommendation pattern, whatever, into the API for this release.
That's the hope, and have enough flexibility in it to be able to iterate as we move forward with minimal or without breaking changes.
Makes sense. And thank you. Somebody added backend properties. I don't know who you are, but that's a good one. Oh, yes. Thank you, Candace.
I added it. I know I'm supposed to be doing something for this. I'm supposed to be creating a proposal, and I haven't done it yet, but I would like to make sure it still gets in the 060, if even if I'm a little bit late to this.
Cool.
To this.
Yeah, we'll have to move quickly on it, but I'd love to see it get into. Right, because we're not the final line of reviewers for this API, we really need to have everything ready early October if we want to have this ready to. And so that's not just the GEP, but it's also implementation, a series of things merged in. So I'm very supportive. Just ping any one of us for help. If we can help move this forward, I think we all want something like backend properties in the API. So yeah, if we can help, let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So there's a couple of action items in here. We will be available to you, Candace, as you work on your proposal. I'm going to take a look at that PR, and then Rob, we just need to double check that we have an issue that's blocking the V060 milestone. Anything else that anybody wants to talk about as far as V060 goes before we move on? Going once.
I do have a couple other items below this, but I want to at least, my main goal here was to make sure that the major items in the 060 release are accounted for. So if you have really an API change of any size and it's not represented here, definitely speak up. I know we have more than this in the milestone, but I want to make sure that we all understand and are working towards the same goal for this release.
Yeah, I'd argue that that's probably it. That's probably all we're going to be able to get done. I don't think that we'll be able to get done too much more than what we've listed just there as in terms of large themes. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And that actually leads pretty nicely into, well, actually, Nick, you've got both of ours are related. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a reminder that there's a bunch of help wanted issues. Some of them are pretty straightforward. I have noticed a few more people sort of wanting to pick up issues. And so yeah, this search shows the milestone ones. Yeah, pick something that's not assigned. Now, say the admission webhook one, this doesn't have to be done on 060. It could easily be done later, but it'd just be nice if someone had a look and saw what upstream Cube has available at the moment for security scanning. It'd be nice to have that done. But I think the publishing the Docker image to the production registry would be really good. Ingress Engine X has I put some links in there to Ingress Engine X's how-to on how they do it. We probably just need to update our release process with some extra stuff. So there's a was it this one? No, hang on. There is. Maybe it's in another. I'll try and find the. I thought I had. This was the one where I had talked to Harry about it.
No, you're right. There's another one for.
This is the security. This is the security one. Sorry, it was the second one. Shane, that one. Yeah. Yeah. So right now you have to pull this from staging, from the staging Kubernetes repo. If we do this, then it will be from the main kates.gcr.io one, the production one, and that will mean that every release will need to do this process. So we need to update our release process as well. I don't think it's not a big change. Just need someone to, and I specifically have left it for other people rather than doing it myself because it seemed like a straightforward change for someone to cut their teeth on.
Roger that. So
Cool.
3 issues hanging out that are high priority and help wanted. If anybody wants to jump in and grab something, we appreciate it. All right.
And my last thing, yeah, if we can open up the milestone, which is linked all the way at the top. I should have put it down anyway, but it is that too. I wanted to run through some of these and see if there were some we could take out for sure. I think there's one for. So, okay, let's start at the top, I guess. The API specification. I think this is one that we all want to get in, but I don't think it needs to be release blocking.
I think that we've actually done most of the work here. Mike, this was yours, but I think I've done a bit already to
yeah, we've definitely done at least half of the work here. So was 2 specific examples where I found this was needed. At least one of them is already done. I don't know that this, again, I don't know this needs to be release blocking though.
Yeah. So there's 2 sort of things that adding the anchor links and then moving the rules about how a struct is used to inside the struct rather than to the field containing the struct. Yeah. And so I think I did that already for backend ref.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think I think the other one was allowed routes, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. No opposition to clearing it from the milestone?
You can assign it to me and I'll clear from the milestone and assign it to me.
That was you, Mike? Who is that? Sorry, I'm not. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, your dog violently objected, it seems. Your dog is like, self-care is king.
His dogs are always angry. They're like, is there software development going on over there? All right.
The next one, I think all the status is being taken care of by Nick.
That's why I put myself on all of those because they should all be closed out by the status review.
Roger that.
Yep.
I feel like route inclusion and delegation is too big to get to include in this release, so that just feels like it has to move. Yeah.
Yep. Too much other stuff going on with status, backend properties, the gamma stuff. Yeah.
Do we want to put it in 070?
I think
Just as a reminder that it's next.
I'm fine with clearing it. I do want it to be next, but there's a lot going on too. So
is Jeff in here? I figure I can just put a little comment real quick.
Don't think so.
All right, what else?
So reference policy seems good. gRPC route, that's good. Yeah, I think the webhook to prod makes sense if we can.
Yep.
The other than AMD 64 one, someone assigned themselves to that, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
One of our new contributors assigned themselves to that.
Great.
So there's this one about auditing the code base is It's actually not a lot of work. It's just someone just needs to read through and find every reference of custom implementation specific and just make sure they're all what we actually mean. Yeah.
Okay. This is a conformance test one. That
I
makes sense to me.
actually said, please put a hold on this until we finish the status update.
Okay, got it.
Once, because it may, if we change how resolved refs works or we remove resolved refs or something like that, then we've got to change how this works.
So not a blocker and yeah, okay.
What else?
Yeah, again, more reasons and status update stuff.
Okay.
Right. Your name's all over them.
Yep.
And somebody already volunteered for the shell script.
Yep.
Route matching precedence language. Can we?
Yeah, it's opening that one up.
Oh yeah,
This
this
is not
is
ringing a bell.
so. This is Sanjay and Steve found this when they were doing contra implementations. It's just that. Yeah, if you have a look, it says if ties still exist across multiple routes, matching precedence must be determined in order of the following criteria. Continuing on ties is the key part. If you just scroll down a little bit more, it's like the number of there's some confusion about whether one of the tie breaking things is how many header matches there are, or like the exact definition there. And so that's Sanjay and Steve were just asking us to clarify that a bit to make sure that this is super clear.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
it's kind of a nice to have, like a couple of the other ones that are in the milestone.
I mean, it
Or-
feels like one thing where we could end up with divergent implementations if we don't update this time. I think
Sooner rather than later, yeah.
Do we know what we need to do here? It seems like this is an open question at this point.
Um,
I guess we just need to choose a direction and say
yeah,
that
it's more we need to choose the direction rather than like, so we have a behavior locked in 1370, and so it's like, do we want that behavior to be the one, or should we
Oh, this suddenly rings a bell.
Got it.
so I think
it's
so this one's
pretty straightforward as long as nobody feels like 1370 isn't the way to go.
it's just, this is just to record is 1370 the right way to do it, or do we want to flip to what Steve has suggested in the comment, and what Sanjay is suggesting here?
Roger that.
Got it. Does anyone have bandwidth to take this one on?
I can wrestle with this one. I can.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. That puts me there. All right. So we have 4 that are blank. A couple of them are like webhooky things that we talked about, kind of being like nice to haves.
Yep.
That one's one of those. Okay. And reference policy. Yeah, that one has to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't see any more grass to mow here.
Yeah, I think we're in a better place and we can keep on coming back to this in the next couple of weeks. But this is good evidence that there are lots of places to jump in and contribute if you've got time. And, a reminder that we are hoping to get this release out pre-KubeCon, so not a lot of time.
No. TikTok.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Backend properties. Okay, so that's where we left off here.
Yep.
Okay, we did that one.
Oh, I forgot to
Wow,
attach my
you-
name to that one, the milestone one that you're on.
Okay.
Sorry, but that is me.
We got one more
I
cherry pick.
filed one more cherry pick, and then I think we're good to go for this release. I included 3 things in here. I don't think any of them are particularly controversial. One is an addition to a conformance test that covers a gap, and 2 are just doc updates that either fix or clarify something.
Makes sense.
And then, 05, the release 05 branch already includes some big bug fixes that I would love to get a release out for. So my goal is to get, once this merges, I'll put together a changelog branch and we can get a release out hopefully this week.
Indeed. Okay. I put my name on it to make sure I review it. I actually have been out of the office today except for this one meeting, but I'll check it out in the
Oh,
morning.
cool. Thanks for making an exception.
Yeah. All right. I lost my place. Okay, nope, here we are. All right. So Nick, you want to talk about 1383 again?
Yeah. So look, I think we're getting closer here. I think there was just a few things here that I wanted to ask people about. Yeah, if you could pull this up and then head to the in the change file, partway down, there is a section that's like the that is the set of rules, the proposed site changes summary. One other thing that I thought I did want to ask about though is Shane, you asked for me to clarify where I was getting some of the stuff a bit in the background from. That whole background section, the numbered list, is actually pretty much a straight copy, a slash summary of what's in the API conventions. So sorry, it's right up the top. Yeah, that numbered list that's in the down a bit further.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned something and I just kind of piled on that we just could put a link in there so that if anybody's ever looking, they know where it comes from.
Well, that's where the link at the top was intended to say that, but yeah,
No, maybe I'm thinking of a different one, but okay, I'll double check. Like I said, I've been out today, but I have notifications I haven't gone through yet.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, if you could check that one for me, and just tell me what you think I should do there. I don't mind, but yeah, like I kind of the problem is that to really give you the background of exactly what the API conventions say, you just need to like really, we could just put the API convention, that section, the API conventions verbatim in there. It's very pithy. It's very difficult to summarize.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know exactly what I was thinking at the moment, but right now I think all we really need is just I would just like to see a reference somewhere so that like we can kind of, people can see this and then say, we're doing this because of the conventions that are already set for us. So if that's not already there.
Yeah, I think it is there, but maybe it's not quite clear enough. So yeah, if you don't think it's
okay,
there,
I'll double check. And I'll focus on getting you unblocked. I won't poke and like ask for any little things anymore because I know this one's been hanging out for a minute.
Yep. So yeah, if we I see Costin sort of asked for a couple more references. This one's hard because it's all of these references are in old PRs and issues and stuff. I definitely was involved. I was part of a proposal to API machinery that I helped work. Evan from Knative work on a proposal to say like, hey, there should be a field in conditions that indicates its polarity. But the SIG API machinery reviewers were not in favor of that. They didn't want it to be too like. They wanted to emphasize the fact that people need to look at these, or if you're handling them in code, they need to be like special case handled, right? You can't have a generic implementation that handles these. Yeah, I haven't looked at Costin's comments yet, so I'm not sure about those. All
right.
So I think, yeah, so the key part here is that just go back up a bit, is where Costin's comment is there's like a summary of those changes.
I think my main comment is to not break backward compatibility. That's my main concern.
So I think the problem is that for us to do this properly, we have to break backward compatibility because we're going to be flipping the meanings of things. We're going to be saying, hey, these things. So it's either we break backward compatibility now, or we do it in a future release. Like there's no getting around that we have to break backward compatibility at some point. So I thought it was better. I thought it was better to break it now rather than later when there's like less people using it.
Can you explain what exactly is breaking? Because from what I've seen is, there is no point to remove some of the fields. The old fields don't need to be removed, so that should not break. Only something changed.
So if we don't say so right now, what I'm proposing that we do is we change a bunch of the condition types such that they are the canonical conditions for indicating that a resource is ready, is finished processing. They are included in the conformance tests right now. So we will either need to update the conformance test to use the new process, or we don't. If we don't update the conformance test to use the new process, then there's no point making the change because we're not checking that people are doing what the spec says you should do. So like, the critical thing here is updating the conformance test because the conditions are part of the conformance tests. And so when we do that, implementations will no longer be conformant until they update their conformance tests. And so that's the breaking change. It's not that the behavior of the API is going to change, as you say, it's status, but the conformance will break. And so we can't have two options that we test in conformance. You can't be like, oh, maybe is it attached or accepted? So like, that's why I thought it was better to get this out of the way and get it done and get and get any breaking changes out over now and be like, this is the way forward. And then we're done. I 100% agree with what you're saying, but this is like, it feels like the worst option.
This is the way.
But I'm not arguing about changing the conformance test and everything else. What I'm saying is from your proposal, what I'm seeing is that you are adding the new standard. I mean, one field that is going to be used, and that's very reasonable. And conformance test will need to be changed to verify that this field is added. But at the same time, there is no need right now to remove the other fields, which are completely. I mean, anyone can set arbitrary fields, and if we have implementations that check those fields, there is no need to break them at this point.
Sure, okay, like we could do that, but it feels to me like we don't need to break them. Yeah, sure, but like it will just mean that those things are checking a thing that implementations may or may not set, right? Like, they will be doing a bunch of custom behavior because the spec says that once I've updated this, the spec will say attached is the way, not accepted.
I see what you're saying. Okay, that's fine. I mean, if we remove it, Istio will keep generating the old fields to not break and to avoid breaking. So I think it's fine to remove them from the conformance test. And okay, that's good. I think I understand now what you're saying.
Yeah, I would just go one step further. That I think it is kind to have some kind of transition period where both are present. I don't think it's a requirement, but it is certainly a nice thing to do. And if it just means leaving consts around and calling them deprecated and saying they'll be removed in the next one, I feel like that is probably a good practice here.
Is that maybe going against because of how long it has historically at least taken for us to release, is that maybe falling into the problem that made Nick want to do this so soon? Like, there will be a release where you can do the thing we don't want you to do, and that will last for a while. And
no, so
there.
I think what Rob is saying is, forgive me if I'm wrong, Rob, but that the key part here is that we don't remove the consts that have the types. Right now, if you remove the consts, then things will stop compiling. If we leave the consts present and mark them as deprecated, then you can still use them, right? Your code will still compile, but your conformance test will fail because we should be flipping the conformance test to use the new condition types.
I'd actually go. I'd go two steps further than that. So I agree with everything you said. What I would also say is we should allow conformance tests to continue to pass, even if you're setting the old conditions. Like, conformance tests can never say you can only set these conditions, just that you must set these specific conditions that we're aware of. And we can't have an opinion.
Yeah. Okay. So I wasn't proposing that we would fail the conformance test if you set accepted. All I'm proposing is that we change the conformance test to only check that attached is present.
Yeah.
Right? I don't care if you set attached, right? But the spec says that you have to set, if you set accepted, but the spec says you have to set attached, right? You can set attached and accepted, fine, no problem. But like the conformance tests only care about attached, right? Like, you know, and so we'll leave the things in there. People can do that if that's what they want. I think it's a bit confusing for users personally, but like, you know, as a migration thing, sure. Like, you know, yeah, that seems fine to me.
Fine with me as well. Yeah, we have pushback from a lot of customers whenever we change something, even if we believe it's not important. They are very sensitive about backward incompatible changes and having a migration period.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I get it. I get it. And so like, yeah, but the intent here is that it is not the behavior that will change anyway. It's just the conformance tests and the way that you check if everything is working that will change, right? So it's not.
That makes sense. So to be conformant, you have to use the new stuff, but you can still set the old status conditions to kind of give users kind of that grace period of understanding, hey, this thing that I used to be looking for, now I look for something different.
Yep. Sure. Okay, I will update the GEP to that effect.
That makes sense. That's similar to what we did for reference policy too. I think we were one of the few implementations that supported both reference policy and reference grant, and that's exactly how we did it.
Yeah, so I'll update the GEP. I'll put that in the top line changes. Could we run back to those top line changes? I think there was one more question I had about those. Yeah. So the other question is that originally in this GEP I had it that so there's actually a couple. So originally in this GEP I had it that all the conditions that we had would be positive polarity. I think Rob convinced me that that's not a good idea. The reason for that, for me saying that originally, was that the Knative folks have a duct typing library, and they do a lot of programmatic reading of conditions, and they have a strong preference that, you know, everything either be positive or negative, and like that you don't end up with any code that handles reading conditions needing to sort of special case and say, well, if you're doing gateway API, then these conditions are the positive polarity ones, and these conditions, and the rest are negative. But I don't think there's any way, like, as everybody said, having everything be negative is really hard, because it means that you end up with a lot of no error false kind of behavior, and that double negative is very confusing and difficult to understand. But having everything positive is bad as well, because like it leads you down the path that you need to have every relevant condition always present on the resource. So what I'm suggesting in this now is that we have a number of summary positive conditions. Attached is definitely one. Ready, I'll get to in a sec. And then I'm thinking that we may in that discussion about ready, we're going to talk about adding a new condition called programmed. There's one that is present already that is currently positive polarity, which is resolved refs. Resolved refs is currently positive polarity because it's like all the references are resolved. That's what resolved refs means. So resolved refs true means everything is good. It doesn't matter if we flip that or not. I've left that as positive for now. It's a little bit confusing to explain in this, but I think it should be fine. But the intent is that for any other thing that is a problem with your config that does not make your resource unattached from the thing that's attached to, that should be surfaced with a more specific error condition. So there's a lot of sort of nuance here. Like HTTP route is very special here because, and the rule that I'm trying to use here is that if it doesn't produce any config in the underlying data plane, then it shouldn't be attached, right? So if there's no config going to be produced in the underlying data plane, then the thing shouldn't attach. There's been some questions there about like it should be no valid config, and I'm like, well, yes, I've tried to update most of the references there to say that, but like the idea here is that a couple of people had sort of asked for us to have like a separate condition that's like this thing is semantically valid. I am not in favor of that because I can't see any times in which your thing would be semantically invalid, but it would still be attached, right? Like if it's semantically invalid, it can't attach because it won't produce any config in the underlying data plane, right? And by config in the underlying data plane, yeah, exactly. The validator should reject things that are semantically invalid. So there's no point having like an extra condition that just represents that. The thing about attachment is, and the thing that I'm really thinking about with attachment here is when you have a HTTP route, if you make a mistake like you reference a service that doesn't exist, or reference a filter that doesn't exist, or the filter is incompatible, like there's rules in the thing that say you need to program 500s in to replace the traffic that would match those things. That then means that all of those problems that would otherwise cause the thing to become attached produce config in the data plane, so they don't cause the HTTP route to become attached. In the case of TCP route, if you don't have a backend service, there's no logical way that you can program that rule into the data plane. So that will cause the TCP route to become unattached. And so that's why I'm sort of using that rubric as the way to decide what becomes attached and what doesn't. So I think I've confused the issue a little bit by introducing that rule, but I do think that I'm trying to use that as the foundational sort of guideline as to whether or not a thing should become unattached. Costin.
Any chance instead of polarity positive negative knows that we introduced an explicit instead of condition error or error condition or a dedicated type that is so it's clear that it's an error and that's negative polarity in your document?
So you call it like error something? Is that what you
error
mean?
is very clear, especially if humans read something. Error is pretty much better than condition and polarity negative. I don't know if it's
I mean, yeah, so like I think that in the API we should refer to them as error states for sure, but they are represented by a condition with negative polarity, right? Like the condition is the struct type, and and it has it has a name and a set of behavior that you get from upstream, and the polarity is about like what happens when the thing is status true. So it's like I'm using it in a very technical sense but I 100% agree that we should consider those as just errors, right? And the errors can come and go and stuff like that, but the positive polarity one should always be present.
No, I understand your proposal. I'm wondering if we have any flexibility to introduce something in addition to condition. I mean, either a top-level field or a new attribute error equal, because that's users are usually familiar with the concept of an error, and I mean it's a bit more intuitive, especially if target audience is users.
I think that this is to use the same phrase that Shane used to, like as far as upstream Kubernetes is concerned, this is the way. This is the way that you do. This is the way that you put status information that you don't want. That's not like extremely specific to your API.
It's okay.
Biggest
problem.
Yeah. So people should. So conditions are relatively new to the upstream API, but they are the way that you should be expecting to check if your resource is working or not. They're not widely used across CRDs yet, but that's because they're relatively new. They are heavily used on Node, on Pod, on deployment, like on a bunch of the resources. So I think that people should be pretty familiar with them. And if they're not, they should get familiar because they're going to need to know how conditions work and what they mean. Yeah. I appreciate your feedback there, but I think people need to learn this. Okay, so I guess the things that I wanted to raise here are like, this is why I'm trying to do this. And the negative polarity conditions thing is important. I haven't specified many negative polarity conditions here because I kind of don't want to have to specify them all. And so the intent is definitely that if there's something that is a problem but doesn't make things unattached, then there should be another condition that appears on there when that is true. And so absolutely not, Costin. You absolutely can add your own conditions. It is, however, expected that if you're adding your own conditions, you use the domain name spacing to be able to add your own conditions. So you have like that is actually, again, in the upstream guidelines, that the condition type allows a namespace, like a domain namespace type. So you can put projectcontour.io/custom condition, right? That's an acceptable type of condition, and it's kind of expected. I'll add something in there as well that implementations may add their own conditions. They need to be domain prefix strings. So they're supposed to be like that. They don't have to be. Obviously our spec is only going to mandate certain names, and the conformance test will check for those names. So and practically yes, and the intent is that if lots of people are using similar domain namespace strings, then you can bring those back, and we can bring those back and make them a constant and make them a standard name, in the same way as we're supposed to do with everything with domain namespace strings.
Yeah, this is great all around. I just want to one, thank you for pushing this through, but two, I'm trying to see, like, we have a tight deadline here, and this is huge change. Would it be reasonable to put some kind of deadline on feedback discussion around this before we just want to get this in?
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. I'd certainly like to see us sort of like any comments need to be in sort of the next 24, 48 hours. And then so that I have a chance to fix everything up and then get this in, because then it's going to take me a while to actually do the implementation, because there's a lot of changes here. You know, lots of conformance tests are going to need to be updated. There's like lots of spec stuff is going to need to be updated. I'm going to need to be very careful about how I do this as well. So yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, okay, so let's aim on comments in 48 hours. We can mention that in Slack, on the PR, wherever. And I know I am due to do another round of review on this.
So yeah, give me
else.
the rest of my day, your evening. Tomorrow your time, I should have a change done on this to sort of post the updates that we've just talked about to this. So it should be reviewable tomorrow morning your time.
Okay, great.
One of the bigger questions I had on this is that it seems like we would lose the ability to represent something where the syntax is valid, but it's unable to configure the underlying data plane. There's a couple examples where we have things like that, whether it's like port unavailable for gateway or a few other things. Given the like assumed reliance on the validator, like, is that okay? Like, in some ways, I think it actually makes the UX a little easier, because you have, if this thing is true, it's doing a thing, rather than like it's valid, but it may or may not actually be doing it. Like, is that the intent, and is that okay?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So if the gateway can't be configured on the underlying data planes, then it should not attach successfully to the gateway class. Like that's the idea, that attached is the thing that you look at to be like, is there some fundamental problem, that can't be resolved, like, or is it like, is there some small syntax error, right? Like if you look at attached and it says attached true, then you're like, okay, things here are mostly okay. Like that's the intent. Yes, and absolutely, it could become unattached later. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we've been really careful with reference grant and HTTP route, is that we didn't want a reference grant being removed to like have a huge blast radius. So that's why there's a lot of rules for HTTP route about, if the service is unavailable because the reference grant is not present, then you program 500s rather than have cause the HTTP route to become attached. There's a bunch of rules there as well about like what happens if you've got three rules inside a HTTP route and one of them works and the other two don't. And there's a bunch of other stuff like that I've needed to think about a lot. So. Cool. Okay, awesome. I think I've got very clear actions there.
All right. Rob, storage version change.
Thank you. Okay, this is a big change, and I wanted to highlight it and make sure it is reasonable and it's something like we want to do. So this change that I made has two parts. One of it is setting the default storage version to v1 beta 1. That's, I think, uncontroversial. That's every recommendation ever. The other is making the decision not to serve v1 alpha 2. That's something that is widely recommended by API machinery. Drop your alpha versions as soon as reasonable. What that means, though, is if your implementation, like many or most, has been reading or writing to v1 alpha 2, it's not going to work with these CRDs. If we release as the current API is designed, or the current CRDs are designed. That's a significant change. We can move forward as exists. This is, for example, the GK implementation has decided just to read and write from v1 beta 1 and move forward with that. But I recognize that is just one of many implementations involved here. The rationale for dropping Alpha 2 as from a served version is that you don't want to get a large set of new alpha users, and it is an alpha API version, and we should drop it as soon as reasonable. With that said, I know this particular transition could cause for a painful upgrade process for other implementations. So yeah, just wanted to start a discussion. Nick, I think you're up first.
Yeah, so I think the thing I wanted to just clarify was what you're talking about here is switching the storage version for the resources that have a v1 beta 1 available only. Like, we're not going to stop serving, TCP route, which is still in alpha. The it's only for gateway class HTTP route. The resources that are currently in beta.
Yeah, and yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? Like, it's only for those resources. Like, we really want to encourage you to move to the beta version of the Go structs as soon as possible for your implementation. The idea behind leaving the v1 alpha 1s be served is that it means that people's tutorials and stuff don't stop working. But like, once you remove the v1 alpha 2 versions from being served, everyone's going to have to update the YAMLs to apply it to be a v1 beta 1. That's literally just changing the API version at the top, not not anything else, because the spec is the same. But it does mean that we can remove those we can do this type alias thing to sort of make it so that we could do the type 1 alias thing, but the idea here is that there's no v1 alpha 2 HTTP route.go file in the APIs directory.
Yeah,
that means that we don't have to update it in 2 places anymore.
So on that note, I linked out to the new type aliases thing. This is something that John Howard did, which he was thinking about how they were going to do this for Istio. And this, I thought, was a pretty clever implementation. If you look at the files changed, it really is just type aliasing for every type that is shared between beta 1 and alpha 2. Which should make it much simpler if you are trying to interoperate between using v1 beta 1 for some resources and v1 alpha 2 for others, which I expect all of us are going to have to deal with. That's all. So I'm hoping this will be less painful than it once was, but it is a thing. And my biggest concern here is that if implementations are reading and writing from alpha 2 today, they're going to have to add some kind of documentation saying, hold on, wait till you install the latest version of CRDs because we haven't updated to support them yet, or something like that. Or get a release out before Gateway API releases.
For a little bit of feedback, at Kong, we have 2 Gateway API implementations, and we have not released the beta. We have feature gates for Gateway APIs. We have not released the beta version. We're about to release the beta version for just feedback. Like, we already kind of said, yep, and tore it out and replaced all of our examples and so forth. And only
did Shane cut out for anyone else?
Yeah, hopefully not. We're only using,
Okay.
we've already adjusted for this at Kong. Just wanted to give you that feedback.
Well, that's good to hear. And Mike asked a question in chat. So v1 alpha 2 structs. So yeah, absolutely. You can still use v1 alpha 2 structs. The problem is when you're making the actual API calls, if you're using v060 CRDs, that's going to fail. You have to use the v1 beta 1 API call, which would mean v1 beta 1 structs.
Yeah, so when you're actually creating a resource, you have to, if you're making a YAML, it has to say API version v1 beta 1. If you're doing it from Go, it has to deserialize into a v1 beta 1 resource.
Yeah.
Or serialize,
so,
sorry.
I think this require, I don't know what the best action here is, whether I should or we should have a discussion, an issue, something to track this. I want to make sure that this does not come as a surprise to anyone. But I'm also not hearing any compelling reason to hold off on this change. I just don't want to take anyone off guard because it is a big change.
So sorry. So today, if I using V1 Alpha 2, does that mean it's not going to work once you make this change?
So with the CRDs that are released in V0.6.0, so in a month or so, what would need to happen is instead of using, like if your controller is using V1 Alpha 2 APIs, you'd have to just do a find and replace and use V1 Beta 1.
Okay.
The APIs are the same, it's just you need to use V1 Beta 1 instead of Alpha 2 at that point.
Got it.
In terms
For
of
our
actually,
action item, would it, sorry, for our action item, would it make sense to send this one out to the mailing list?
I think probably I want to make sure what I want to do is start with a smaller group first, make sure we as, most active implementers are on board with it. And then once we are, then we can send it as more of an announcement than a question. But I just want to make sure that, yeah.
one thing that I just thought of, Rob, is if we stop supplying the V1 Alpha 2 CRD definitions and they're already installed in the cluster, won't they just stick around?
So yeah, good question. So the key point here is that V1 Alpha 2 is still included in the CRD. It's just not stored or served. It's just sitting there for the purpose of conversion, for the purpose of anything else. You can't actually write to it. You can't use Alpha 2 for anything, but it still exists there. So you can do kind of a seamless upgrade from 0.40 CRDs all the way up to 0.60 without things breaking.
Cool. So yeah, this is a problem that has evidently come up in the API machinery before.
Yes, very much. Okay, it seems like we're okay here. I'm fine to move on to next. Thank you. Shane, thank you for taking all these notes.
Yep, no problem. All right, Rob, Contributor Summit CFP submitted.
Okay, this is just a thing. We all talked about this and said we should do that. And I just action item, it's done. So in case anyone else is going to, yeah, that's done.
All right, cool. Triage with 5 minutes to go, just as a heads up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sure.
Do we already know that we're going to come back around to this one?
Yeah.
I know I am at least, and we talked about it earlier. So this is kind of the only one we really need to talk about, right?
I mean, this is self-selected. There may be other things on there that we should cover. It may be easier just to look at the files change because this is a pretty tiny one this is kind of formally making room for next changes and incoming conformance tests. I think we've talked about this in meetings. We just hadn't formally documented it. Basic idea is we've said in patch releases, we are okay with expanding conformance test coverage to cover things that are already in the release. The spec is already there. We just don't have good coverage. So we're going to expand that. That's something like we've said is in scope for patch. And then for minor versions, we're saying that we can make changes to the recommended conditions to be set. And we can change conformance tests to match updates to the spec, which really is just status at this point.
Makes sense to me.
Cool.
I'll let somebody out. Maybe Nick wants to LGTM it.
Yep, sure.
Cool.
Cool.
And if nobody has any comments on that, then we ended on time today.
Congrats.
First time it's ever happened.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, it might be. Cool. Well, for those of you who are have some time this afternoon, the next couple of days, there's lots of stuff to review and a couple things to pick up for V060. If you need any help, we really appreciate you jumping in on some of those issues that have been tagged. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Thanks.
Cheers.